Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Flawless Execution webinar. I'm your producer, Ansley Ankers, and I'll be here to answer any questions you may have and provide technical support. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to you via email. The presentation slides will be available immediately following the webinar on Afterburner's SlideShare. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up for Q&A. I'll be monitoring the chat and Q&A box where you can submit your questions at any time during this presentation. Thor, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
All right, Ansley, thank you for that introduction. And I want to reiterate to all of you listening what Ansley said. If you have a question or a comment or you'd like additional information, just type it into the chat or the Q&A box, and we're going to be monitoring that. And we'll answer all those questions at the end of the webinar. We'll also turn on the video camera at the end of the webinar. We don't want to chance breaking the bandwidth here, though. We are doing some remote ops right now. We're at our headquarters in Atlanta, and the city of Atlanta got about a ½ inch of snow, and it looks like the zombie apocalypse outside. I'm not kidding. There are cars stranded all throughout my neighborhood right now. It's amazing what a ½ inch of snow can do to the south. But so we are in split ops in different places, and we're going to press through. I'm really excited about this session. This is one that I've been asking to do for a while. If you followed our webinars, I haven't done a webinar for a bit, and it's been because I've been on the road and client-facing a lot. But I asked the team back at Afterburner if I could jump in and do a presentation on some pretty incredible sales lessons learned that we've acquired over the past 18 months as we really focused into the sales vertical in some deliberate ways. And we're going to go through some scenarios that we've supported and talk about the pain points that we were addressing, as well as what the outcomes were, and of course how we got there along the way. As Ansley said, I'm your host. My call sign is Thor. That's what most people know me as, but my real name is Joel Neeb. People call me Thor because I was a fighter pilot and a trainer pilot in the U.S. Air Force for many years. I flew presidential escort missions. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. I've got my master's in aerospace science. I went to the University of Texas, Hook 'em Horns, where I got my MBA. At the headquarters for Air Force flight training, I was the instructor pilot of the year, and I was also embedded with a Silicon Valley tech company in all of 2015, and I primarily work with tech companies and med device companies, and really because they're on the cutting edge of technology, and that's the very similar selling motions, believe it or not, behind the scenes that take place there. So that's where a lot of our lessons learned have been coming from. So why are you listening to a fighter pilot talk about sales? What the heck do they have in common? Well, let's go through what it takes to create a fighter pilot in my world. So just like you guys, I was not born a fighter pilot. I was driving cars when I was 22 years old, and that was the extent of my transportation capability. And at that point in my life, I started flight training. And in a short period of time during flight training, they took me from being able to drive a car to all of a sudden now flying hundreds of miles an hour by myself through canyon, 500 feet above the ground, going through any type of weather, flying across the country, flying upside down, pulling G's, and flying even in formation just a few feet away from another aircraft. And the amount of time it takes for us to create a pilot with those capabilities in the first primary flight training program is about 4 months. So unbelievably, look at your watches. Today is the middle of January. That means by about the middle of May, you'd find yourself in a position where you could do just about anything that the top pilots in the world can do. Definitely within the top 0.5% of the pilots through this program. And the reason that's important is because it was incredibly chaotic. It was incredibly complex. We have 350 instruments and dials in the cockpit, most of them there to distract me at any given point in time. When you're flying in formation, you got to keep an eye on at least one other aircraft, many times 3 aircraft, sometimes even 7 aircraft that you're flying in the same formation with at the same time. And so you have to have a system that pulls you through to become proficient at flying the aircraft very, very quickly. Well, I also know that the people on this call are dealing with complexity, and I also know that the people on this call are dealing with a lot of noise in their environment. As we help teams the biggest challenge we're asked to help out with these days is, hey, we have transactional selling taking place. We need you to help us turn this into transformational selling. Or to put it another way, we need to do solution selling for our customer. We need to affect a business impact for our customer, not just sell a product. If this is sounding familiar, if this is sounding like what your team thinks it's uniquely pursuing, it's not unique. It's what everyone's talking about right now. It's a huge market opportunity, but the ocean is a lot redder than I think we give it credit for, and really know how many other groups are going after that. So at the end of the day, we are not so different. You in your business suit as a sales professional leading a sales team through the chaos and the complexity of a market that's moving faster than it ever has in the past, with consumer demand that's changing every single day as technology becomes more and more of a player in every single industry and vertical that we work in. The world is changing in ways that we can't even keep up with at this point. Well, when I was flying 2 times faster than the speed of sound in my F-15, that's a picture of me on the right side of the screen, standing behind the tail of the F-15. When I was doing that, that was a world that was moving faster than I could keep up with as well. And so we had to distill that environment down to the few key components that we could affect at any given point in time. So out of 350 instruments, I don't have 350 eyeballs, so I had to make sure that as a team we were focused on just the 2 or 3 things that we could use to be successful and keep the mission on track and the team moving in the right direction. So let's talk about some of the sales initiatives that we've been supporting. We're going to go through 3 very common sales problems that we have been supporting over the past 18 months. You could pretty much bucket all of the support we've given and the challenges that we've been asked to alleviate in these same 3 areas, and we're going to go through them one by one. So we're going to talk about the pain points as well as the success stories, because it's important to know exactly what are we solving. We don't want to be a solution to a problem nobody has or an answer to a question nobody's asking. So we want to make sure that we're actually addressing a specific pain point. And I want you to look at these pain points and ask yourselves if this is something that you in particular are experiencing with your team. And then we're going to talk about, of course, the success story, because it's got to work. It's got to have an outcome that we're excited about. But we have to map out that path that got us there along the way. We'll talk about how we help. And so if you're an individual contributor right now, maybe you're running a very small sales team, or you're just selling on your own, that's fantastic. We're going to have some tips for you to be able to scale best practices with other team members and to be able to fine-tune your game as a salesperson. If you're a sales team leader, we're going to talk about what it takes to wrap your hands around a growing team and to create leaders' intent that drives the team to sell more effectively and communicate clearly what your intentions are for that team. And if you're a line of business leader and now you're not only in charge of sales, but you also have your hand in marketing and maybe on the product side as well, and you're trying to align all these very, very different teams behind the scenes, we're going to have a conversation about one of the common pain points there and how we help alleviate that as well. The first sales challenge that we are asked to alleviate is an unsustainable execution rhythm. You're the person running in the center of that hamster wheel. And as someone told me, came to us about 14 months ago and said, Thor, we're doing okay. We're hitting our numbers. But here's the thing, very predictably, every time we hit our numbers, they're moving the quota out. And no big surprise there. That's going to happen every time. They're stretching us to meet future revenue goals as well, and we can anticipate that every time we meet those goals, it's going to go further out. But it really feels like we're working harder each time, and we're getting less of a payoff. And I have team members who are saying this is just unsustainable. And the worst part is, it's not like we are spreading out our execution or our cadence throughout the entire quarter. So if you look at our quarter, we're busy. We're working for the entire quarter, but the last 3 or 4 weeks of the quarter are just ridiculous. It's a sprint. Sometimes we only have about 50 or 60% of our sales coming into that last month, so we're way behind, and we're counting on those last final days before the quarter end for us to make up all of this ground. It's like running a marathon and walking the first half and then running it at the last half in a mad sprint. And he said sometimes we make it, sometimes we don't, but it's all contingent upon last-minute heroics. And the dirty little secret is that people are staying up all night and trying to get these deals done. And even worse, it's hitting our pricing integrity, because now we're giving them, sliding these deals under the door that are way lower in pricing than we'd like them to be. We're setting a precedent that it's hard for us to get away from when we go back to them and try to make the next sale. And they say, hey, you gave us a 90% discount last time. We're expecting that this time. Bottom line is this. It's an unsustainable execution rhythm. This is the way you know that you're in an unsustainable execution rhythm is if your team members are leaving, even though they're succeeding or maybe getting close to succeeding, they're walking away from the business, and it's because you're burning them out. You don't have a system that allows them to iterate and to improve each time and to work smarter instead of harder behind the scenes. And if you're one of these people caught in this, the symptoms you're probably feeling are a lot of dread every time the quarter end is approaching, a lot of confusion over what you should really be doing over the first half of the quarter or the first half of your time period, and it's just not a stable execution rhythm for the entire team. So what was the fix for this group? So we brought this team together, and they had an unsustainable execution rhythm. Really, their pain point was churn. They had team members that were walking away. There was a top tech company, and they had their team members that were even successful were leaving the business and going to other places where they could slow down and not keep up this frenetic pace that they had to pursue. This is a tactical problem. It's going to be different from the next one. This is a tactical problem. This is something that you can fix in the short term. You can apply some internal changes as a leader to your team to make sure that they get back to a sustainable execution rhythm. The first thing we're going to recommend that you do is conduct debriefs with your team. So if you've listened to any of these webinars in the past, or if you know the flawless execution cycle, you know that one of the key components to our success as fighter pilots was that after every one of the missions we flew, after my 2,500 missions that I personally flew, I conducted a debrief with my team to find the root causes for success, to scale those into the future, and then stomp out the inevitable mistakes. And it's critical to have these discussions and have an open, honest session and conversation about what we can do better the next time. So do these debriefs, and you're looking for two things. You're looking for the common challenges, the common pitfalls that people are bumping into. You're going to find out, and very predictably, it's going to be that we don't have the right amount of pipeline in the beginning of the quarter. We're not advancing it the right way. Maybe we have false pipeline that's taking place throughout the beginning of the quarter, and we're just not seeing the returns on our existing pipeline and advancing plan that we should. And so behind the scenes, you're going to need stronger inspection based off of those debriefs. And you're also going to look for pockets of success, the inevitable pockets of success. Even if you're on a team that's performing terribly in your eyes, there are still things that are going well. And they might be small things to debrief, but hey, hinge on those successes. Let's scale those. Let's not just have the bad conversation with our teams. Let's look for the pockets of success. Who does have a strong execution rhythm that's able to, stay calm at the end of the quarter and has a strong forecasting capability for their sales and doesn't discount too much? We found those members of the team. We debriefed with them, and sure enough, behind the scenes, they had a clear cadence that was taking place in the early part of the quarter so that they were able to not only have the right pipeline to set them up for success, but able to advance it. And so they didn't just have milestones to meet at the 11th and 12th week of the quarter. They had milestones to meet at week 2 and week 3 to make sure that they were along the same pace they needed to be to succeed. If you're running a marathon, you would not want to glance up for the first time at mile 21 of 26, right? You want to hit your time and your goal by looking periodically at the milestones you should be meeting the entire time. So the debriefs help to expose that. Then they created tactical missions to work smarter and not harder. So this required more inspection behind the scenes. This required actual sessions that took place between the sales leaders on specific ways to advance pipeline for the team members early on in the quarter to create a more sustainable execution rhythm for everybody. And then, of course, at the end of this story, they had a team where they had about a 20% churn rate. They haven't lost one person in the 14 months since they've implemented this. They have had they've hit their forecast every single time, and this is just one small example of a team that was able to establish a sustainable execution rhythm for the group. And oh, by the way, they kept increasing quota every time. That's not going to go away. We know that's going to take place. So as sales leaders, we have to figure out how we can help our team work smarter and not harder. We can't just push them out the door and say, work a little harder for a little bit more next year. Once again, that's bumping into an unsustainable execution rhythm, which is really the next one we want to talk about. So the first problem was a tactical problem. The first problem was around, we just have an execution rhythm behind the scenes that is not going to work out in the long term. This is a different scenario. This is a scenario where we have to turn the numbers around for the organization. The best example I've got of this one and of a team that worked their way out of a big problem, we're working with a group that had $42 billion in market cap, one of the top tech companies. They've got a leader of one of their top 3 product verticals that came to us in 2016 in the summertime, so about a year and a half ago. And he said, hey, Thor, good to meet you. We've got 2 quarters where I've been in charge, and we have missed our numbers miserably for 2 quarters, and I probably got about another quarter and a half before they're going to fire me. And he gave me a peek behind the scenes, and he said, it's not even all my fault. We put 2 selling cultures together. We had an acquisition, and we decided to mash these 2 cultures together, and we said, this is going to be great. We'll be selling 2 products to the same customer. 1 + 1 will equal 5. It'll be all this synergy. And, of course, without a good plan to meld these cultures together, it didn't happen that way. 1 + 1 equaled about 1.5, and they lost ground instead of making more. And the cultures didn't necessarily get along with each other, and at best they were just working in parallel and not with each other. And at worst they were competitive with one another. And so missing a big opportunity to have the sales numbers see some synergy, and he had a short amount of time before he was going to get fired in this scenario. So what was really tempting for him to do, put yourself in his shoes, it's really tempting to just say, so Thor, what I want you guys to help us fix is next quarter, right? That would be the Band-Aid fix on a strategic problem. And the closest alligator to his canoe really was the fact that if he goes another quarter without hitting his numbers, they're going to most likely fire him. But he didn't do that. He resisted the temptation to go after the next quarter's numbers. And he heeded our advice, which was to create the long-term vision for success first, because this is not a tactical problem. This isn't as simple as the last challenge we brought out with the unsustainable execution rhythm. This isn't just a matter of adding a couple more meetings for inspection and scaling best practices for advancing pipeline from your debriefs. This one is a systemic problem where they put 2 cultures together. This comes down to people, focus, and alignment, and it requires a different fix in order for it to be long-term. And so it is more challenging. Don't miss that piece of the equation here. And he had a lot more against them than the previous group did. It's more strategic as well. So if they can turn this around, then they are going to open up a huge opportunity. If they can't turn it around, they're not just worried about churn. They're worried about this entire business vertical going in the wrong direction and potentially going away. And so what he did is he resisted the temptation to focus on next quarter, and he got his key stakeholders together, and instead they looked at their long-term vision for success. Took the 2 cultures who weren't talking to each other, and he said, hey, let's not talk about what we're going to do next quarter. Why do we need to work together for the 3-year vision? Tell me what success looks like in 3 years. And the truth was they had an incredible product. They had an incredible value proposition. But the challenge was that they didn't want to spend the time to learn how to work together because it was just too easy to do what got them here in the first place and do their old selling motions. They needed to build an alignment to a future vision that would compel them to do more investments up front for that long-term opportunity. So he described success with his team in exquisite detail, what their brand's going to look like, what their financial metrics are going to look like, what their structure internally is going to look like in 3 years, how they're going to differentiate in the marketplace in 3 years. And he built this high-definition destination. We've devoted entire webinars to building that in the past. So if that sounds familiar, go check out those webinars and learn more about how to build that destination with your team and how to build out that 3-year strategic plan. And after he had that, he took that high-definition destination, and then he created the critical leverage points. And he said, if that's where we're going in 3 years, if that's our North Star as a team, I love those financial metrics. I love that too. We're going to build out something amazing based off of the plan that you all helped build. So they got their fingerprints on it and their buy-in and their insights, and they're excited about it. He said, then what are the steps we need to take in the short term? And this allowed the team to have a much more informed eye on what did need to take place in the next quarter. So instead of starting the conversation with, all right, team, we got a huge problem. What do we do this quarter? He started at first with, where are we going? Where are we going in the long term? And based off of that destination that we're all excited about, what does that imply we're going to do in the next quarter? They aligned on 3 critical leverage points, and they focused maniacally on those 3 critical leverage points. And they said, we will do nothing else but these 3 things because that's what's going to dig us out of this hole. I can tell you 2 of them because they're not confidential, and then the last one was confidential and had to do with their product. But one of them was on better forecasting and alignment behind the scenes so that they could have closer look and inspection at their numbers. The next one was training. They had obviously not done a good enough job training their teams not only on the new product that each group was adding to their vertical, but also on how to combine and do solution selling with these combined product portfolios. And so that was the second piece of it. And the third piece had to do with a specific product launch that they were looking at the time. And then the reason he succeeded with the next 18 months since we talked was because when people came to him and they said, hey, love that destination, great idea, I agree with the 3 critical leverage points that you picked for right now, but, hey, boss, I'm working on this other thing, and it's not one of the 3 critical leverage points. Do you want me to continue working on that? I'm sure you do, because it's really important. The boss had the foresight to say no. He said no to the noise, to everything else. And it takes a really strong leader to do that, because trust me, you're going to hurt feelings and you're going to step on toes when you tell your team members to stop doing things they're already doing. But it takes that type of leader to hold them accountable to the critical few and keep the team focused. Remember, in the 350 instruments, we can only stare at a few at one time in the cockpit. And as a leader, I'm sometimes telling my wingmen that I don't want you looking over there at the radar. I want you focusing your eyes on this other instrument instead, because that's the phase of flight that we're in. And this leader for this vertical had the same foresight. And you can contrast that with another example. We worked with another team about 3 months ago, and I talked to the leader of this group. It's a $2 billion vertical, and he said, confidentially, Thor, I don't know if I can just push my team out the door and get them to work a little bit harder and make a little bit more in the next quarter, and I just don't know how I can push them to make them do this, and I'm at my wit's end. We're kind of plateauing in sales. I just don't know how I can push my team any further. And if you listen to what he's saying, he's trying to push his team to work harder to get a little bit more next year, and nobody wants to be a part of that. Contrast that with the original leader who built the long-term destination first. He had a pull model. His team was being pulled into a common destination that everyone was excited about. Would it require some upfront work and some alignment and getting together and working as a team? You bet it will require that. But he's not asking them to just go out there and work a little bit harder for a little bit more. They've got a destination in mind. That's the difference between a push model that nobody wants to be a part of. Nobody wants to go out and work a little bit harder for a little bit more next year. You want to scale your efforts. That's the difference between that approach and a pull model where things get really exciting if we can figure out the first step to get to our destination. Next one, in our last scenario we're going to talk about is a team that's going after the white whale. We've been involved with a couple of key account teams or global account teams or whatever your group calls them. There have been 4 that we've personally supported over the past 18 months. And if you know anything about the sales team breakdowns, the key account teams are the ones that really go after the white whales, right? The big, huge global accounts that are the entire company is looking at. And the big ones for the team. So a step above that enterprise for a group. And we had a particular team that came to us and said, we are going to go for this huge number. We're going to go for $120 million opportunities moving forward. We've had nothing even close to that ever at this point. And, the highest one we've ever had is about $15 million, and we're going to go after the white whale opportunities, and we're going to rope those in. That's what the leader said. What do you think the team said in response? You're crazy. That's the last thing we should be focused on. We need to be just trying to go from a $10 million average order value to a $15 million average order value. Let's go for base hit, not for the home run. And the leader was able to show the team that if they scaled some of their internal successes that were taking place on these base hits, they could reach an opportunity where they added enough value to really, no kidding, go after a big $120 million white whale of an opportunity. And this, once again, goes back to the difference between transactional selling and transformational selling, the solution selling. If you're one of those teams that's saying we're shifting from just doing transactional selling to being that trusted advisor or partner or solution selling, this is a key piece of it. And if you're able to affect business impact, if you can go to a company and say, I'm not just selling you a product, I'm selling you an outcome, I'm selling you a business impacting change that you've been asking for, that's worth a lot more. And you'll be able to push a proposal across the table with a lot higher number on it once you work backwards from that business impact. So here's how they did it. Once again, and this is the trend, debrief the pockets of success. So for this team, they had a couple of $50 million deals, a couple of $20 million deals. And so they had folks that were hitting a little bit further than the rest of the team, and we debriefed with them. And it turned out there were some key behaviors that were taking place behind the scenes that nobody else was really adhering to within the other groups. And it turned out that these teams that were succeeding were immersing themselves with the customer, were really listening for the business impact. They didn't walk in with a product portfolio and say, let me push this product onto you. They worked backwards instead from the business impact from the solution that the company was looking for, and then and only then they were able to figure out what a customized solution would look like using their products and using those debriefs for success. Just telling your team to go after that white whale opportunity isn't enough. You have to start mapping out the behaviors that are succeeding right now and that the team can use to scale success. So we say success takes two things at Afterburner: inspired alignment and disciplined execution. And you have to have equal parts of both. The challenge is that very often the skill sets to provide inspired alignment and disciplined execution are very different. In other words, a visionary leader is great at the inspired alignment and getting everybody motivated and bought into a long-term destination. And more of an operator mindset is necessary for that disciplined execution, but you have to have both. And so this leader had sold them on the idea, but he hadn't sold them on the path yet, and he needed to use debriefing trends from his teams that were succeeding to show how we don't have everything figured out, but you can at least map out the first steps based on what's working for these other teams and these other deals that are larger. He took the pockets of success and then he standardized the best practices. In other words, he made it Sesame Street simple. Even though they're going after $120 million deals, you can still take those key behaviors behind the scenes that are taking place, and you can make a 5-step checklist. When we worked with the NFL last year, there was the MVP, the National Football League MVP for 2004 was working with us, and I said to him, how did you get so many sacks? You broke the record for sacks. No one had ever done that before. And he said, you know what? It was simple. And he gave me this simple technique that he used behind the scenes, and it worked at that point in time. And he talked about how Peyton Manning kind of changed things, and now you can't use that technique anymore. But it worked for him then. And the point is this: even in a complex, chaotic scenario as the highest level of football, you can figure out small tactics that you can scale with your team to succeed. We saw the same thing in dogfighting when we were flying airplanes. So if you're wondering how to succeed and go after the white whale, talk to your team and start to map out the inevitable pockets of success that already exist. Inspect those to scale the first steps towards the big goal. But here's the thing: you're not going to map out every step. You're not going to have the entire journey figured out. You're going to break glass internally for your company as you go after this white whale, as well as externally with the customer when you push that proposal across the table that has a 10x number on it than they were expecting. So you have to expect to be bold. You're going after a lot of value. You're going to have to build that value into business impact that the customer desperately needs. But then once you've got that, you can go after the white whale opportunity. And if you're listening and saying, well, we don't deal in $120 million, which just doesn't apply to me, who cares? Just multiply your current average order value by 3 and tell me how you get that deal. And I guarantee you that it's going to come down to customer impact. If we're talking about selling a $5,000 product right now and you need to get a $15,000 solution to sell in the future, it's still going to come down to selling from business impact and scaling the best practices with your team. You're going to have to get outside your comfort zone. You're going to have to get your team outside of their comfort zone. Nothing good, no growth takes place inside of your comfort zone. And so you're going to need to push them outside of there. They're not going to love it. You got to kick the birds out of the nest, and you're going to make them believers by selling them on the idea and also standardizing a few of the best practices. So you're going to, just like I didn't feel prepared to go solo the first time in an F-15, and you never do. If you wait for a student to feel prepared to break the sound barrier by themselves, you'll wait a long time. You're going to have to equip them with the tools, tell them, I know you're ready, and push them out of the nest and have them go succeed. You can't wait for, hey, I'll believe it when I see it type of attitude. You got to flip the script in that. Believe it first, and then you'll see it. Have your team believe it, map out the first few steps, and then you'll start taking them down that path. All right, so what happened with this team? They're going after these huge deals. I can tell you that they closed a deal for $80 million and another for more than $140 million. So they absolutely crushed it in less than 12 months, even earlier than they expected to, and they did it by mapping out and putting it into a checklist format, the steps to go get that next success. And if I can take a dogfight and make a checklist out of a dogfight with all the chaos and complexity of the different altitudes and the different weather and the different terrain you could run into, you can make a checklist for your team to use that's Sesame Street simple to start marching towards an opportunity like the white whale sale. All right, so we went through 3 scenarios, 3 very common challenges that our teams face that we supported in the selling environment. I gave you 3 examples of teams that were going in the wrong direction and how they were able to use flawless execution techniques and things that we learned as fighter pilots to enable their teams to succeed in a very complex and chaotic environment. And the last thing I'll leave you with is some of you are saying, well, that's great, but we talked about this at a high level. I still don't really know how to debrief. I heard high definition destination. I'd like to build a strategic plan, but I don't feel any more equipped to do that after hearing this. And what about all the details, in other words? So I kept this at a high level on purpose because I want you to be able to see the high level details and then go do some studying on your own for the execution pieces. And that includes looking up the webinars. So everything that was in bold font, we've got a webinar about the debrief, standardizing best practices, high definition destination. Go check out those webinars. And the other thing I want to tell you about is that link right there, Afterburner.com Accelerator Academy. For 2 decades, we've had clients asking us for something that'll sustain the training and that they can use as reference material behind the scenes. And we just last year opened this up. This is our internal training, what we use to train all our facilitators at Afterburner, and it includes little 30-second videos and micro-learning opportunities for you to go click in there and go watch us talk about debriefing and how to conduct it. You can play these videos for your team to kick off a debriefing session and set the tone for the group. So we used to just keep this available to enterprises, and it would take a big company to buy a lot of these to get access to it, but we're now allowing all of our Flex Tribe members access as well. And you can go to that website that you see there to check that out. Afterburner Accelerator Academy, Ansley just put it into the chat box as well. So now, this is the fun part. I'm going to turn on my video so that we can see each other, and I am going to open it up to Q&A. Ansley, you want to start us off with that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Thor. And as a reminder, the chat and Q&A box are both open. You can enter your questions there at any point. Our first question is, what are the 5 steps in a checklist?
What are the 5 steps in the checklist? So that was a generic answer that I gave, meaning you can look to have about 5 steps for your team to go succeed. Here's what I mean by that. What I want you to do is I want you to go debrief with your sales teams. Talk to the most successful sales groups that are there. And I want you to look for commonalities in how they go to a client. You're going to discover some key behaviors that those teams are using to succeed. And what I don't want you to do with those behaviors is make a 40-step checklist that you hand out to all your new sales team members and say, hey, go follow these 40 steps and you're going to be successful selling. It can't be that many. It has to be a low number. I just threw the number 5 out as an example. Even better is 3. Sesame Street simple is the key to succeeding with these things. If you went and flew a sortie with me when I was an instructor, when you finished your first flight, we wouldn't land and I wouldn't say, hey, you're terrible. You did a horrible takeoff. That landing, oh my gosh, that landing was horrible. You totally can't do a loop. You did a really poor job at that aileron roll. No, I'd pick a few things to focus on. And so I'd say, here are the 3 things I want you to do differently in your next attempt. And those were based off of standardized practices that we knew help people to succeed in our environment. So look for those same success behaviors behind the scenes in your environment, and then standardize them, make that a checklist for your team to execute from. Here's the thing, though, that's got to be a living, breathing checklist. Just like that NFL player told me Peyton Manning threw a wrench in his plan and didn't allow him to get the sacks he wanted using the same technique. You're going to need to update those techniques as time goes by. But that's the fun part about it. It's always discovering the new techniques that are working and scaling those to the rest of the team.
How do we identify and prevent the early signs of burnout so team members aren't leaving?
Great question. I think it's 2 things you got to do to avoid the burnout piece. One of my favorite quotes, I may have said it on a previous webinar, I can't remember, is that vision without action is daydreaming, but action without vision is a nightmare. Here's what that means to me. Vision without action means we just get together, we do all this planning, we never really talk about how we're going to get there, we never turn our plans into action, and you get me all excited about where we're going, and then it's just more of the same. And you know what? I feel like I'm kind of better off never planning with you, and I'd rather just go to my cubicle or just go sell on my own and not get together with the team. So we don't want that world. We want to have something where you can create a compelling, cool picture for the team, this destination that they're all excited about, but you also have to map out the first steps for them to get there. And so you need to show the team how they can start executing as a group to be successful. That's one way to avoid burnout. You not only have the vision, but you also have the initial steps for the team to succeed and scale best practices. The second way to avoid burnout is the other side of that coin. You don't want your team members in a world where they're just busy for the sake of busy, and every time the goal line gets moved a little bit further away and they don't quite know what they're building towards, and maybe even they're watching their bank account grow, but at the end of the day, they can't justify all the time they're putting into this because they're just in the hamster wheel of selling, and to what end? You need to sell them on the vision, too. So you need both sides of the coin. You need the disciplined execution with a clear path to get there, and there needs to be a destination. There needs to be an inspiring, get me excited type destination. If you ask your team members, you know, what do you tell other people you do at work, and why would you tell them to come work for us? If all they say is it's a good paycheck, you can expect high churn. You need them to articulate to you what you're building. There should be a we're going to take over the market type of story. We're going to add this type of value in people's lives story. And if you're scratching your head and saying, yeah, but my work's just not that glamorous. I mean, how would I make that case? You can turn any work into something that's compelling and that people are excited about. When I was working with Nike, with their leaders, we were behind the scenes, and they're all excited about a project that they're supporting. And I remember elbowing one of the senior vice presidents and saying, gosh, your team is just so passionate. I love how you guys get excited about what you're doing. And he looked around a little bit, and he said, well, very quietly, well, Thor, we got to be excited about what we're doing. If we ever forget why we're doing this, we'll realize that what we're doing is just selling sneakers and T-shirts. And it dawned on me, there's nothing inherently cool or sexy about what they're doing. It's just that they build this incredible brand behind it and this incredible story and this incredible why. And so that's why they don't churn and burn out when they're asked them to go sell sneakers and T-shirts. They got a great story behind the scenes. They equip their team well with disciplined execution, and we see them successful. So that's how you avoid the churn. You got to have the destination and constantly updating the path to get there.
How can we implement these steps if our organization doesn't use flawless execution?
We get that question all the time, and here's the thing. You can implement them within your sphere of influence. You know, often I say, I would love to work in an environment where nobody else uses flawless execution because you get to be the shiny penny. I mean, you have an opportunity. If nobody else is debriefing, great. We're going to be the sales team that actually scales best practices. You guys don't share your best practices on the other team? Fine with me. We're going to do that internally, and we're going to get better because of it. You're going to see our team start to excel and taking over. And what ends up happening is, as you clean up your house and you're starting to use a more iterative approach and you're learning best practices and your team's excited about the destination, people are start wondering how you're doing, and they'll be asking questions. And trust me, your leadership will notice, and it'll shine a spotlight on the other areas that need that work. So you can't change the whole company overnight by doing it this way, but you can definitely create better execution rhythm within your team.
How do we keep our eye on the strategic ball if I'm an individual contributor and I have to split focus on other requirements?
Great question. So it's how do we keep our eye on the strategic ball as an individual contributor? I'm task saturated. So today a podcast came out that we recorded called The 5 Reasons Your Strategic Plan Will Fail. We recorded it with our CEO, and we looked at the past two decades of supporting strategic plans with our teams, and we looked at the top 5 reasons we've seen plans fail. And that's one of the biggest challenges that you're articulating right now. How do I keep focused on the strategic stuff when the tactical stuff's getting in the way? It really takes a leader that is going to keep the team focused. Remember the example I gave earlier where they had 3 top things that they were focusing on as a group. And then that other person came in the room and said, hey, love those 3 top things. They're great. Love the destination. But I'm working on this other thing on the side. I think it's a great idea. What do you think, boss? Of course I should still keep working on that, right? Remember what the boss said? He said, no, stop working on it. We have to tell our teams what to stop doing. One of the reasons Steve Jobs was so effective when he came back to Apple the second time was when he showed up. You remember Apple in the 90s? They had a horrible brand. Nobody was buying Mac. Nobody was buying anything that they built. And they had like 40 different SKUs. If you name products from Apple right now, you can only name like 3 or 4. They're top brand products, or at least they were, you know, over the past couple of years. And the reason that they were able to be so successful, one of the key reasons, is that when Steve Jobs showed up, he took the 40 SKUs of things they were selling and he wiped the desk clean of 37 of them. And he said, we're only going to work on these 3 things from now on. These are the 3 things that are critical to our success. And you can imagine how angry the teams were because they said, we're working on this other thing. We're almost done with it. He said, I don't care. Somebody else said, we're getting revenue out of this product number 34. We're actually getting revenue from that. But I don't care. It's slowing us down based off of our long-term destination that we're pursuing. And it was incredibly insightful of him because obviously he focused the team on the key things. So it takes a strong leader to keep the group's eyes on the critical leverage points. And
we have time for one last question. Should the individuals who have been successful be presenting their debriefs to the rest of the team?
Great question. So here's what I got for that. It's not so much a high five to those individuals and say, great job doing what you do. And it's great too. Don't miss the opportunity to celebrate your team, but you're not parading around these success stories. We're not just saying great job. We are saying we succeeded, and here's how you can too. Here are the key behaviors that we debriefed and identified as critical to success in this example. So I typically don't have the team that succeeded present their debrief results because I want to bring in a third-party facilitator. In our world, we're the ones debriefing with them. So Afterburner team members come in, we debrief the success story, we find the root cause for success, we talk about how you scale that and use Sesame Street simple language to standardize that with the rest of the teams. And then we don't just present the debrief results as an attaboy or attagirl. We now show them here's why it succeeded and here's how you can use these same techniques with your team. So we'll have them stand up and, say, hey, great job, thanks for your input and your insights for this. But it's not just about giving them the Salesperson of the Month award. It's about finding that root cause and a scalable lesson learned to use for the future.
All right, thank you, Thor. And I would like to remind everyone on the call that this is being recorded and we will send it out to you via email early next week. Thor, I'll let you close this out.
This one is close to my heart. It's a lot of fun. Selling's fun. I tell you, there's, every person is a salesperson. I tell that to engineering teams all the time, that you're selling your ideas to other groups. And if you can get better at articulating that value, and remember one key thing that allowed our white whale team to succeed, they weren't talking in terms of value from what they were providing. They were talking in terms of value from what the other group needed. So if you remember nothing else from this, learn how to articulate your value in terms that the other team, the customer, the other group you have to work with is going to respond to, because that's the need that they have that you're going to meet. I love working with these groups. I love doing these webinars. I answer every question that we get from these. So don't hesitate to reach back out. I think we got our email address coming out of this as well. I'm Thor at afterburner.com. This is me. Check me out on LinkedIn. I answer all the questions I get there as well. I interact with a ton of different clients and Flex Tribe members along the way, and that's the fun part for me. So don't hesitate to reach out and tell me about your story and ask questions behind the scenes about how we could help you. All right, Thor, over and out. Thanks for your time.